All right, we'll kick this off. So starting with P2P Peer Discovery. So this is the only update is we have two official vendors. One is OCI, the other is Fudan through Offline Studios. This week they have their questioning period, and on Monday we will send out the results of their questions. Other high-level summary: the RFP is due on the 5th of December to us, and then we will have roughly a week on our schedule to review and such. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, and this we've previously talked about this, is how do we evaluate two proposals or more proposals? So one of the things that I wanted to show you guys is we threw together a sample scoring card. And remember, at the end of the day, we can choose whatever we want. So it's not like we mathematically calculate a score and they automatically win. The purpose of this is if we go through each of the proposals, we look at their requirements and we say, oh, okay, this requirement feels like they really did a great job. We'll give them a 4 on that. This one, they didn't hit it all, so we're going to give them a 1. Just it kind of gives us a blush overview. It's not overly complicated. And again, if one team scores more than the other, that gives you information because the one with the higher score also might have the higher price. And the lowest price, as you guys know, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. There's a lot of factors you guys will work through. So I thought I'd throw this out as a possibility. Anybody have thoughts on this or any other ideas on how you would analyze two independent proposals to come to the conclusion?
I like this. It's extra data. It doesn't even mean that we select based on that, but it's extra data. It gives a starting point for people to review. Because my first question when you mentioned we have a week after December 5th is extremely short. So anything to be able to kind of facilitate that process, I'm in support of. This is cool. It's the first time I see it. I like it.
Everything Yves just said, thumbs up.
Second that. This is great framework, man. Good work.
Yeah, looks like it'll let us, give us structure to quantify some of our decisions between these. So between two proposals. So well done.
All right, perfect. So when we get there, Jesse, did I cut you off? Did you want to compliment me too, or no? Just kidding.
This is incredible, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, man. That's awesome. No, okay. When we get, and I have to say, our Amy Burton actually put this together. It wasn't me. So since this is recording, hey, Amy, everybody liked your work.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, so that's just the quick update on that. That was really informational. So Antler CDT, do we have an update? I can't see the participants. Ted, are you on the call? Is there something on Antler?
Yes, I am on the call.
Do we want to give an update on Antler, or is it just like I know we are in process of building out a schedule for that? Is there more you want to update on that?
Well, I think last week we voted and said, yes, everyone was okay that we would, that the ENF would build it because it made it where we could get Bucky on it right away. There are 3 items now. Guillaume joined us this week on the planning session. There are 3 CDT items that are looking to go into the March 31st release. And we're still doing, with your team, we're doing the sizing to try to make sure they all squeeze in there properly. So we don't have more data other than, and I don't remember them off the top of my head. We could look up what the 3 kind of distinct parts are that Bucky is driving into this release.
Okay. Any questions for Ted? All right. Let's see. I believe so. The milestone payment for SDK. Eve, you coordinated the test transaction a while ago, correct?
Correct.
And we didn't close this out last week.
Shit, did we not? Oh no, so we did the test transaction, so the back and forth. So now we actually just need to do the MSIG to transfer everything over. Correct? I don't believe we closed the loop on that. Let me double check.
That's correct. I believe that's
web SDK client or web client SDK. Was that the address? Yes. So there's no EOS in there. So clearly, I'll close the loop on that. So everybody did the test. It worked. We are able to send to and from. The key permission set for that web client SDK is essentially the owner is EOSIO.grants because I guess the ENF is the one that's legally liable for this. But the active, which is what we would use, is the EOSIO plus the working group or .wg, which is the 4 of us here. So we would be using active unless there's for some reason standstill, the coalition disbands and now we have these liabilities, then we'd be able to kind of as a fallback. So everything is agreed to, everything was good. So I'll propose that MSIG so that the funds can be transferred, and essentially the funds earmarked for web client SDK are going to be sitting in that account instead of the current treasury. Which is the same permission set as the current treasury. So I'll close the loop on that. Thank you.
Any questions for Eve? All right. So update on the Ledger app. Ted, do you have an update on this one?
I don't know the latest. I know Eric Passmore is taking that, and he is working with the Ledger team and has done emails back and forth with them. But I don't know the actual latest status. I can look that up and see if I can find anything.
I think he said he submitted the pull request, but he was trying to get it approved. That's what he said on the call.
I'll read you a status if you guys want to hear one. It's maybe not what you're expecting. Good news, we will be able to fix the issues raised by scan build and rerun the testing to validate correctness. I expect we'll be complete with fixes by Tuesday, November 15th. The date is an estimate subject to change. We find issues during testing, may have difficult performing the tests. Can you confirm the steps we need to take to upgrade EOS Ledger, et cetera, et cetera. So he's, going back and forth with Thomas Julian, who's in the Ledger group out in France. I'll see if I can see anything from him. Let's see what the status there is. It does not look like he has replied back, or if he did, I was not kept on the reply at that point. But I'll ping Eric offline, and I can text you, Jeff, with the status, or break into a call and tell people if they're interested.
Perfect. All right, Trezor Hardware. Lucas, this is you.
I have not received any response from Trezor.
Is there any possible escalation path, or is it really we're kind of?
I don't have any contact. There's no email. There's no phone number. There's nothing I can contact. I use their essentially forum to post that, how to contact them regarding this, and nobody responded to me.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how people get in touch with these guys.
Well, I guess we're at their mercy, so we'll just keep pinging them and see what happens. All right, new P2P RFP. This is a duplicate of the peer discovery, so I'll mark this one done. IBC governance, I left this on for 1 week, but I believe the document's been shared. Would everybody agree that this is a closed item?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, adding new change to the coalition. There was a meeting on the 14th. An initial document was created just to do the highest levels of topics. And I believe the idea was that next Monday we would continue the call as the Monday topic. Is that correct?
Yes, as long as nothing more pressing emerges.
And I don't know, Jeff, if you want to add something to that agenda, but I have somebody that reached out. I'm not convinced that they want to join the coalition, but they seem to want to be able to have their logo perhaps posted on the Antelope website because they use Antelope. So anyways, not to discuss here, but I want to discuss it next Monday if we have that discussion of what are we doing with that type of request.
Can I have a t-shirt with your face on it, Eve?
If you want to make go for it. If you get them commissioned, sure, go for it.
And the notes that we took, those are okay to display on screen, correct?
I'm okay with that. I thought we even were recording to be able to publish that call.
Yeah, I thought we had discussed recording and then it seemed like we didn't actually.
Yeah.
No, none of this on screen is decided. This is just draft discussion of what we had. Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought for transparency, I would put this up here. People can pause the video now, read through it.
Essentially the notes of the call.
The notes, right. And it's slowly creating a framework for us to create a fuller document later. All right.
Correct.
All right, good. Flying through these. All right, secure smart contract library. So thank you to Ted and Douglas. They reviewed, negotiated down the price a little bit, and agreed to the final settlement. Contract is being drafted right now. It is almost done. What I will do is as soon as we have that contract, again, just for a second set of eyes, I'll make sure, Ted, you can look at it. Douglas, you can look at it. Make sure that we've got the price negotiations as expected. Otherwise, this is same contract form, and that should be ready to go out fairly soon.
So is the idea then that we need to vote on this? We haven't, I haven't seen, for example, what the new negotiated price is and if there are terms that are changed. And I don't think we've actually decided whether or not we're pursuing.
The negotiated prices are the same as the standard negotiated prices. We didn't seek to do anything different there. We did a 15% reduction on the smart contract development and protocol development or architecture, those segments. Across the board. As I recall, we had approved this pending that discussion. Or
my impression was that you and Ted or whoever, but I think it was you and Ted, were going in to lead the negotiations, and then you come back to the table and say, here's what essentially we've negotiated with them, but we still need kind of a final vote. I don't even know what the total cost is, for example. So I thought we would then review, knowing that two people were sent in to negotiate, and then take a formal vote on whether or not we actually agree with it.
Sure, that's fine. I mean, either way, we went through to do that step, and so whether that's approving the proposal itself, or just approving it so that we can now vote as a coalition on the negotiated price. Whichever way that ultimately is, that step is done. So if we're going to vote on it, we have the numbers on. We
could do the vote right now. I guess that's what we did for SDKs for instant finality and such. So I would still do that. I guess one thing is, does the team believe that they've already won the bid? Because if that's the case, then we need to maybe clean that up next time. But if they don't, then there's no issues there.
And honestly, I think this was my mistake. I might have said, I'm pretty sure I said, okay, the next step is we'll kind of go through contract negotiations, because I was talking to Denis, and Denis knows our process with that as well. I think DeFi Box and Pizza was on the phone as well. So that certainly is vague enough where my mistake still allows for us to have that final review and vote on it. What I can do is, after this call, go get that document together, post it on the coalition channel. And if you guys review and if you think it's okay, that's fine. If not, if there's follow-up questions, then we can make a plan for that, right? When we can get back together and talk about it.
Because we'd already reviewed this previously, right? So the only step that was missing was kind of that negotiation.
Yep.
From my point of view, I don't know about the others, but if you just displayed it on screen now and we do a quick review and what changed and what I would feel, I believe anyways, without having seen it, that I could take a decision and vote formally within the next 5 minutes type of thing. Because we've already reviewed this, right? Each of us had already reviewed it, and then we sent off to do negotiations. What I don't know is what's the delta. I need to see the delta, and then whether or not that meets kind of what we originally thought. And if so, I'd be in a position to be able to vote in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah. So what I'll need is, because I don't have that document pulled up right in front of me.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Maybe if we get into another topic and people start talking, I can quickly switch over and see if I can pull it up. Like I have pieces of it. All right, so we'll come back to this in a second. All right, next one, Lucas to provide details on RAM issues. This was done. The RAM RFP just for the academic research. I posted that a couple days ago. I sent a reminder earlier today. So I guess my first question is, do people need more time to review the RFP, or do we want to bring it up and discuss it now?
I reviewed and I have questions about it, either clarification or to make slight modifications. So I'd be willing to talk for a few minutes so that you can go look for another document.
Hey, what a great idea.
Right? So if we look at the business requirements here, maybe if you want to just scroll down a little bit, because everything could fit on one page anyways, the BRs and the TRs. Thank you. So when I look at the business requirements here, from my point of view, it seems like a lot of it is to find out what's wrong, but there's no business requirement in there, the way you read it, that tells me, and then to present solutions, specific solutions to address what's wrong. It's a little bit more in the technical requirements, but not really in the business requirements. So I don't know if a BR4 needs to be added. And then the overall feeling as well, with some of this, what I want to ensure is that this is research to go do research. This is an RFP to go do research on what are the current bottlenecks, here are solutions proposed to address those bottlenecks. I want to ensure as well that those solutions that are being presented as I don't know if that's a business requirement or a technical requirement, but that it's something that's feasible. Because what I could foresee is somebody comes back and says, well, yeah, you can re-architect your protocol to make it that you no longer have those issues. And I'm thinking, for example, of a Sybase. I listened to Sybase, but that's not realistic. We can't upgrade. We need to basically shut down. It's a hard fork, and it's even more of a hard fork. I think it requires even more of that. So I would like to have a business requirement or a technical requirement, I'm not sure where it fits, that specifically mentions that the upgrades and the solutions proposed need to be compatible with actual Antelope. So that we're not off on, all right, we're scrapping Antelope and starting from scratch with something else. Otherwise, I guess the information that is going to be presented is not really going to be of help to me anyways. A good example of that would be instant finality in IBC. It is protocol level changes, but we're still building off of Antelope. We're not scrapping Antelope.
Is that succinct enough? Or does
sure. Yeah. Or yes, I understand that because this is so big, it will likely require hard fork and/or some type of system contract upgrades or whatever it may be. But that the premise is, yes, it needs to be built off of Antelope, not replace Antelope. And then I guess the first part is, I guess that's maybe more of the business requirements, is that solutions need to be presented. Not just here are the problems. We have a pretty good idea of what the problems are. We need to know kind of what are the actual proposed solution. And I didn't really feel that was a requirement currently. And the other one is more of a comment. In the technical requirements, there are two. So TR5, TR6, let's say. I'm not sure, but when I read that, it seems to be leading towards a particular direction, like the solution needs to be of a specific type of solution. And I'm not sure if we're bottlenecking ourselves or even if my statement is valid or not. Because part of the idea is we don't know what the potential solution can be. That's why we're doing research. So I don't want to say the solution needs to address, for example, needs to discuss solid state drives. Maybe there's a solution that has nothing to do with that is actually found and viable. And I'm making this up, but just looking at TR5, for example. I guess at the same time, it does say inspect and discuss, which doesn't mean that it needs to leverage. Maybe that's the distinction, and maybe that was the idea behind that. I don't know if anybody had comments or if that's even valid.
I think it makes sense. Making it clear that whatever solutions are presented are not, out of the left field where it's like, okay, build a new blockchain, right? That's not a solution.
It's not a solution, exactly.
It has to be framed within the Antelope framework. And ideally, something that doesn't require, some crazy upgrade where you have to, just be down for days, right? So maybe it's just a matter of finessing the language on these requirements.
I guess DR4, what you just, I'm guessing, Jeff, that you're the one that wrote this. I think addresses my first comments. I'm good. And TR10 that you added, maybe that can be reworded slightly, like must be compatible with or must build off of, or I'm not sure what the proper language is there, but that's kind of the general idea. Yes.
proposals in PR4 must be maybe extensions of the Antelope protocol, or
yeah. Maybe it must be an extension or extensions. Yeah. Like the base remains the base. You're adding something onto it, or you're adding features to it in order to unlock the RAM limitations. Actually, I just thought of something else, and this is, I guess, up for debate. I would personally say that the solution cannot include a separate token. So what I would not like is somebody that comes and proposes, well, great, I'm going to do a new token that will essentially create a new blockchain in order to solve your solution. And then, well, yeah, sure, I'm building off of Antelope, but now you're bound by my token. So it can't be something that locks us in another project somehow. It needs to be open source. It needs to be built off of Antelope.
Just on, first of all, you wrote YR11 instead of TR11, but also for, here. And also for TR10, I would say maybe something like a proposal must be an extension or refactoring of Antelope protocol. I mean, like removing code would be good too, you know?
Yes, that's okay. And I guess TR11, I don't know if anybody else has any, I guess, opinions on
that. I totally agree, but I don't think we want to
what if,
start adding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
there's
assuming
a
that the solution works within the current resource framework, right? And creating a new token is not, it's not something, it's not a solution.
Maybe the wording should be something along the lines of that the solution needs to have a clear and I don't know the right word, but a clear upgrade path for the 4 coalition chains, because you also need to consider between, you know, I think all 4 of us, we have unique resource models, right? Like EOS is Power, TELOS has Rex. I don't think WAX has Rex. I think UX has RAM token that's different. Yeah. We need to make sure that if we're all going to be happy with this solution, it needs to offer all of us a pretty clean, clear upgrade path. I don't know the right way to say not a lot of downtime or, you know, impact to the network, but, you know, the 4 of us need a clear upgrade path.
Yeah, I agree to that. I support that. That's a really good add-on, Jesse.
I can see, I definitely agree to that. I can see how one possible solution might include not an external token, but perhaps a internal token / resource like disk or or cold storage or something like that that's also purchased the way RAM is.
So let me give you the example. Like, for example, the DApp token for VRAM. What I would not want is that somebody proposes something similar to that. Like that, I'm not looking for a solution that just creates another product that then now users need to somehow buy into in order to unlock that function. That, to me, defeats the purpose. So in a way, it needs to be at the protocol level.
Yeah, I think
it's okay. Yeah, it's okay to add a new resource as long as it's fit within the existing resource framework, which is essentially working with the mainnet token.
Well, I mean, I think it's having like a new resource made available is okay, but what is probably outside of the scope would be to make assumption about the economic relationship between that new resource and the existing economic relationships that already exist between the token and the other resources and all of that kind of stuff. Like basically like what I'm trying to say is it should be a technical solution and not a economic or social or governance
or a licensed solution, some kind of IP that now, that's what I'm trying to avoid, I guess.
Right. So
the closest example that I can think of it was VRAM.
Right. It should be purchasable in the sys token of the given chain, similar to the way RAM is, right?
Well, and I think, Eve, you bring up a good point, maybe that we haven't covered, which is the VRAM example not only introduces a new token, but introduces a whole new like infrastructure set. So like the solution needs to fit within the existing NodeOS infrastructure, right? Like it's acceptable for, in my opinion, for block producers to need to increase some disk or, add some fast disk or something, right? Because this stuff has to go somewhere. But if it means you need to spin up a whole new like side chain, liquid apps network that not all block producers are going to run, and there's a whole new level of trust. Like to me, that probably wouldn't necessarily solve it. But maybe, I don't know, maybe if people disagree, that's not valid.
No, I
agree with that.
Like this has to be
we don't
part
want
of the protocol, right? This has to be part of the system smart contracts, not a offshoot of that. Right?
Maybe that's what we say, Lucas. Maybe we say it needs to be part of NodeOS and it needs to be part of system contracts. It needs to be at the protocol level.
That makes sense.
And very much agree with what you said, Jesse, in the sense of course, if we're expanding the capacity and capability of the network, that means, yes, inevitably the validators may need to buy more hardware in order to be able to accommodate that, but it's still the same validators. It's not a new consensus mechanism.
Do we need to? Should we ask that it specify a migration, suggested migration path between present and future, or is that already covered?
I like that. No, I don't think that's in there.
So we say upgrade paths. Do you want to reword that to migration paths?
I don't know that matters.
Yeah, is there a difference? If there is a difference technically, then we should choose the correct one. I'm not sure. I personally use migrate.
We're not really migrating.
Migrate applies typically to data, and upgrade is more systems. But I think upgrade is more technically correct. But
upgrade is more like upgrade or update is more to me better, because migrate suggests you could be going from and
there's something new.
Update is more like A1 to B1 or A1 to A2, right? An upgrade of existing versus a migration to new.
I'm good. I'm good with that. That's fine with me.
Looks good.
Right.
Do we want, in terms of business requirements, this is maybe tricky, but do we want to also define a timeline in the sense that whatever is proposed has to somehow, so if we go to TR12, that must provide a clear upgrade that we say, and that upgrade must occur within a certain time frame, like 12 months or 8 months or whatever it is. Or no, it doesn't matter. Because the reason why I'm thinking this is really important for WAX. So do we make it a requirement that whatever is being presented, not only does it need to be strong, it needs to be something that's achievable within a relatively manageable amount of time?
I think the wording should be something along those lines, but I don't think it would be the role of whoever answers that RFP to determine the time estimate or budget constraint, or you can have it as a
when you pitched instant finality in IBC, you had to actually give your milestones in the timeline.
Right, but I mean it's because I think here it's more like we're building this RFP to get material that will be essentially used in drafting further RFPs, like probably like let's say we publish this one, someone responds, they produce some sort of research, they say, okay, like here's a bunch of different solutions.
True that.
And then other people would probably bid on these solutions, and they would then propose timelines. And
you're right. No,
Yeah,
you're right. This is the research. It's not the solution. Thank you.
yes.
Right.
So with IBC and Instant Fidelity, we knew what it was that was being done, and so those could be created. We have to remember that this is it's a very challenging proposal, and I don't think we can just mandate that it be done in some period of time. Like I don't know that there are any clear solutions that are for what we're trying to do. So,
but we can add in there that like proposed solutions should be like commercially reasonable to undertake in a short period of time, and like I don't know exactly the language, but we're essentially looking for something that won't take like 3 years. Like we're looking for something that's going to be reasonable to undertake, and it's not just like this big moonshot type of thing.
Right.
I see a couple of different buckets, right? So maybe we also ask for solutions to be categorized within these different buckets. Like, so bucket number one is
short-term, mid-term, long-term
resources. Maybe that, but I'm thinking more about like, okay, so the question of account being represented on Antelope, and how resource allocation fits into that, right? Specifically RAM. So account is one bucket. Then, node processing information and how the block producer is able to actually, validate transactions and then process what's coming. Right now everything has to sit in memory, right? So that's another bucket in terms of like, how the node software is structured. And then the third bucket could be, this mutable, immutable data, and how smart contracts address it, right? That could lead into like this third or fourth type of resource.
Yeah, the one thing I would recommend against is trying to ask for timelines right now, because two reasons. One, that will increase the cost of this RFP, because then they're going to have to scope everything relatively well enough to be accurate. And we might not even pick all of the items, right? They might come back with 14 items and we only want 3 of them or 5 of them, but we've paid for them to scope 7 additional ones. Second of all, if we take those 5 we want and then we're putting them out as RFP again, we're using the marketplace to drive down those costs a little bit. So, if 2 companies bid, we want to see an unbiased view initially of how long they think it's going to take. But if we already have how long we think it's going to take before put that second round of RFPs out, then, somebody's like, oh, I could have done this in like 3 weeks, but we said it was going to take 4 months. They're going to come back with like 3 months. They'll be like, oh, we're doing it at a discount, right? See what I'm getting at?
Yeah, it's a difference. It's the group that's going to have to actually do it and figure out a plan to execute is probably the best place to look for timeframes, right? Not the ideation and initial sort of validation of an approach.
Yeah, and we don't have to do a one-to-one. So if somebody comes back with an idea that we believe is monolithic and might be a good idea, but could be broken into like 6 parts, well, when we put the second round of RFPs out, we can break it into 6 parts. Like, we don't have to have people bid on the monolith.
Sure. I have another key requirement I'd like to suggest if we've decided on this one. I'll take that as a yes. So I would like to have some documentation of any approaches that they spent any amount of time on, any significant amount of time on, and then rejected, and a reason why. So, because I'm concerned that we don't want to keep sort of chasing the same, cold fusion crap. If there's a determination that because of X, Y, or Z, it's really not possible. So I'd like, since this is research, and since it's likely that there will be paths that they pursue, but determine aren't practicable or possible or whatever, that there be some documentation of that. It doesn't have to be extensive, but I want to know what they tried and rejected, and whether and the reason for the rejection, whether it was just it was too costly, ultimately didn't work, or whatever, so that we don't get this report and go, yeah, but did they try this? Did they try that? I want to know what they tried and rejected and why.
I agree. We did that in the blue papers, and I guess this research paper is somewhat similar to the blue papers. Mm-hmm. It's not just which solutions are you proposing, but which solutions did you look at, and why aren't you proposing them?
Yes,
because that's valuable information. Important. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
that'll be a great addition.
Yep. All right. Any other items for the RFP? All right. Do we want to? Are you guys ready to vote now on whether or not you want this released?
I am.
I am.
Same here.
I am.
And I vote yes.
UX vote yes.
Wax yes.
TELOS yes.
So efficient. Good job, guys. Did that give you enough time in the background, Jeff?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The bottleneck is clearly Jeff's typing speed.
Yeah, quote in the background while I'm writing out sentences of requirements for you in real time.
Jeff, I found the screenshot of the cost changes, and I sent it to you. Okay.
Yeah, I got it. All right, let me pull this up. And my monitor's doing weird things, so I'm going to share it this way. All right, so what was discussed is the type of hours used in design and in architecture were reduced, and that's where the overall cost reduction is found. You can see it's 28,480 less at this adjusted cost. And then the rest of this was untouched. And if I bring over this other spreadsheet, you guys see the spreadsheet?
No, I don't see the spreadsheet.
No,
still I just see the image.
Still just the.
All right, let me.
JPEG.
Yeah, I thought I was doing that. All right.
So again, in asking and coming back to them and asking for a revised proposal, we said don't worry about the prices. We want to keep those standardized. It's just about the hours. And in my view, the contingency on contingency was concentrated in those areas, which are also the highest, the $320 an hour rate. So I didn't want to create a big hassle that I felt would have diminishing returns in in moving this forward. And I think we were pretty good with it. We wanted to move it forward. We wanted to push back on price with good reason, but I also considered it as sort of an unstated mandate that we not turn this into an overly complex bidding process. And Eve, you and I had discussed that as through part of our discussions with Aaron from Gray Mass about how we were going to approach these things. So I felt that I had pretty clear idea that was your approach as well.
So what you saw, you can see I put a sum function in. So this is the total function for all parts. This includes the requirements that all four groups are splitting up and the requirements that the one group is doing separately. We've explained to them that there's going to be one contact for the contract. There'll be one contract that goes out. So this is now fully inclusive. It's the 485.14. I'm assuming people are thinking. Are there questions I can answer?
Sorry, I thought I was unmuting. I was unmuted. I have questions. So what I'm looking on screen right now, it doesn't line up with what was previously on the screen in terms of numbers.
Yes.
Are we looking at the right thing?
Good point. So no, it is the correct thing. They gave us a spreadsheet that had two dimensions on the hours. One was by the role or task, which is what you were looking on the other sheet. So, and this one is by requirements. The reason why they had things discounted on the role or task was because we were asking for a discount on the hours for architecture. And so they pulled that essentially out of multiple requirements by just discounting the overall amount of time spent on that.
Got it. And then what you were saying, Douglas, is that basically I guess the two previous lines that were in yellow, those were the areas that were targeted because they were higher amount of hours and the highest rate per hour. Was the same exercise done for the others as well, or the others, in your opinion, reflected an accurate amount of cost per hour and rough number of hours, in your best opinion, to do those tasks?
Yeah, it's a little backwards from that. They were the ones that I asked them to review primarily because I thought that's where the most padding was. They also corresponded to the highest rates, and therefore it seemed like the best place to attack. I didn't dig into other things. It seemed like given that we do intend a certain amount of padding or contingency because we're asking for a firm bid and all the things that entails. I didn't have a problem with the projected hours for anything else. At the same time, I didn't see. So I asked for a 20% reduction in those specific line items, and they came back with a 15% reduction, and that seemed suitable. And I didn't see any. I saw it was diminishing returns, trying to negotiate between 15 and 20%. When I wanted to keep in mind the overall goal of having a good bidding process. I don't want to drive people away because we have to go through 9 rounds of cost negotiations on each thing that comes through. So I focused on those because I thought that's where the padding was. It's just so happened that it corresponded to the highest cost per hour tasks.
So the original bid, what you're saying, Jeff, was that it's $28,000 more than this. So the original build was, let's say 513,000, correct?
Yes.
And now it's 485.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I'm just trying to find, and maybe somebody's faster than me. So this stemmed out of the idea in Audit Plus Blue Paper, right? The secure smart contract libraries. So the secure smart contract libraries in the Blue Paper, which were very, very rough in terms of general timeline, had a total estimated cost of 170,000. So we're looking at roughly a little over 3 times more, basically. Is it because we're getting 3 times more of what was originally discussed in the Blue Paper? The cost, I guess where I'm getting at is the cost is still quite high compared to what I thought it would be. That's kind of my position. I don't know what others' opinions are, but I don't know how comparable it is to what originally was proposed in the Blue Paper. So is it because the scope is much bigger and there's way more libraries and way more smart contracts that'll come out of this?
So looking at it from line item to line item, I didn't see anything other than the parts I mentioned that stuck out to me as being excessive. There's documentation, there's testing, there's things. I had felt that, and in the initial discussions around the areas that I thought there was excessive padding, it was primarily because I felt that there were clear precedents that they could leverage in designing these. Bart also weighed in on that because he wanted to specify which those precedents were, and they were things like Uniswap v2 contract, Aave lending, DAI stablecoin, over collateralized stablecoin. And so the ones that they came up with were exactly the ones that I expected they would be, just because they were the ones any knowledgeable person would expect they'd be. So I did not compare these back to the Blue Paper. I dealt with what was in front of me, and nothing that was in front of me seemed that it was the number of hours being proposed were out of touch with what it was likely to take, plus a reasonable contingency at it.
And to confirm, what we get out of this, or what the coalition gets out of this, is a series of smart contracts that replicates building blocks in the DeFi space, correct? So it'd be like, here's an audited template that you can use for, building something like a vault. Here's a smart contract template that's been audited that you can use for something like Curve, et cetera, the ones that you just mentioned, correct? Like that's
there's 5. There's 5 of them. Yep.
Okay.
And so one thing I didn't do though is I assessed this. I felt that I was tasked with assessing this based on the reasonability of what was proposed in terms of costs and basically times for the tasks laid out. What I didn't factor in any way, shape, or form was whether the overall cost was going to be had a good cost benefit return for Antelope. And in fact, I looking at it on the face of it, I personally would think that $500,000 for these is a lot. So I don't know. Just in terms of, I understand how they got these numbers. I don't think it's unreasonable how they got these numbers, given what was asked for in the proposal, and also remember bearing in mind that part of the cost is, since they're not paid for the proposal, we do should include some of that in the kind of final cost for those who win the bid, right? Because this is not non-trivial. But I don't know. I'm not signing off that having these, 5 contracts is worth, $500,000. I mean, one of the contracts already exists, right? So one of the contracts, the one that's based on DAI, is also NVM, which I guess is already a Antelope based stable coin, right? So that is open source, I believe. So I just want to be clear about what
we're down to 3 minutes left on the meeting. So does this need to be, and we're not going to be able to really get into another topic, but do we need to have a second meeting on this?
I still have some questions.
That's kind of where I was going.
I still have questions on the rates per hour based on who's bidding and such. And I've said that from the beginning, because one of the teams that is bidding is EOS Nation, and I used to be part of EOS Nation, I will be harder on the questions than I typically would in order to ensure that there's no conflict of interest there. So I guess just looking at this, I thought it would be a little bit simpler, but looking at this right now and comparing it, I'm still surprised at the price point that it's coming at based on the hourly rate for smart contract engineers and smart contract security engineers. So I only heard the $320 per hour. I don't know what the other rates are. That makes sense depending on where the people are, but if they use $320 for every single person, that makes sense depending on where the people are.
They only use $320 for the protocol design and the smart contract development.
But did they? I guess the question is, did they add geographic localization to the rate per hour?
I do not know the answer to that. Did they add geographic localization? So, meaning what? Meaning.
So, for example, when the team that prepared the Audit Plus blue paper bid. They were slow missed, and they were charging $200 per hour is their rate for a smart contract security engineer. What I heard is the $320 per hour, but is that because that is what the cost of a security smart contract engineer is in a particular area in the world, and actually we need to adjust that based on whoever's doing, because there's 4 teams in this, right? I'm just wondering if that was taken into account, or they just said, great, we're going to charge the highest price, even though our typical price is actually lower than that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think that, we had planned to try to set standard prices based on, when I say we, I mean you and I. When we set this up, we were trying to set standard prices regardless of where people were in the world, right? And I don't know if
I'm just comparing to the audit. So at some point, somebody said $200 an hour is a really good rate, and now they said actually $320 is a better rate. Again, it just goes back to I'm harder on this one because there's 4 teams and because one of them is EOS Nation.
Can we see the
full
proposals?
Transparency?
Can we see the proposals side by side in terms of here are the hourly estimates per line item and the rates blended rate being used?
We do have that. It's in the form of it's in the form of, I think, 2 spreadsheets that needed to be looked at side by side. One that was just one of the contractors, and one that was all the other contractors. So it wasn't fully unified. The reason that, but the rationale for having the 320 rate is the idea that they are proposing that doing that work requires a top level developer, right? Somebody who's who's a PhD equivalent in this kind of development. that you could challenge the assumption that it requires that level. Essentially, it's a port from existing smart contracts in EVM, in Solidity, to Antelope, to smart contract language. In discussing points with them, the response, as I recall, was that these are contracts that are going to be presented as standard. There's no straight porting of one to another. There needs to be different approaches to memory and whatnot considered. So I with that, I took them at the word that it was that it required that level of experience. But that is open to, that's just a that's a judgment call. On this, I had asked actually that somebody else join me on it, and Ted was there, but Ted was and Bart was there, but they were basically both I felt relying on me to do that assessment. So I would love it if an additional person would come in and do this, although I fear that I may have, if the numbers aren't right, I fear that I may have misunderstood what was being asked, and given them a better sense that we had agreed to their negotiation. So that is sort of a sticky wicket. There was at whatever point there was a miscommunication about exactly what we were doing. And I did not know that we needed to come back to the group. I have no ties to any of these groups, so there shouldn't be any expectation of any kind of favoritism or anything.
No, and thank you for your work. I wasn't insinuating that at all. Apologies.
No, I didn't think
that's how I came out. Guillaume, because you said that you'll need to refrain on this one because you're one of the 4 teams in there. Do you have anything that you'd like to maybe share some clarity on? Or
the only thing that was discussed that is maybe a little bit relevant is that following this, let's call it the negotiation, the hours were reduced from the first 2 items, so like the design and the smart contract engineering, but we decided to apply that reduction across the board. So everybody took essentially like a 15% haircut on all of these items. So that's relevant somewhat. But regarding the rest, no, I think I'd rather just abstain, because I do have a dog in that fight, I guess. We are one of the smaller contractors on that bid, so I will simply abstain from any additional comments and this.
What does that mean? Does that mean that the group said, okay, well, he wants 15%, 20%, 15% reduction on these things, but to keep it fair, we're gonna actually internally apply that against everything.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Because we had all of these items broke down by the team that was responsible for each phase. So everyone is taking a 15% haircut.
No, you're not taking. No, everyone's not taking. Everyone would be taking a much smaller haircut, right? You didn't say you did. So this is my point. Like to break.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, you're right. Basically, like the 15% was on the first items, right? Yeah.
Yeah, your share. Yeah, because it was only on one portion. You're splitting that up, so it's everyone's.
Yeah, I think it came down to
3%. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I have one question maybe that's easy to answer if you have the either Guillaume or Douglas. So the top rate of $320 per hour, because that's a particular expertise. Do you know how many people are at that rate within the particular bid?
It's only a line item for one, to my understanding, but
Right.
It's one person. The reason why I'm asking is no.
Don't you have these, Jeff? I mean, like, it was not per person; it was per responsibility.
Per hours.
Yeah. Okay. Where I'm going with this is that if I do 444 hours plus 190 hours, but then I reduce now with the reduced hours, it's just under 540 hours. 540 hours divided by 40 hours a week, that's 13.5 weeks. If there's two people, that means it's 6.5 weeks. So it's a month and a half of two people at $320 an hour doing nothing but this, for example. It's only one person. That means that person is working for 4 months doing nothing but that. If it's 4 people, you get my drift. So I'm wondering how many people are actually at that rate, the amount of hours. Either it's one person that's going to be working on this for 4 months, nothing but that, or 2 people on 2 months, or 4 people for 1 month. I'm just trying to get the idea here, because it seems still quite high.
For the entire, are you talking about
justifying? I guess that. So if it's a particular skill set, let's take, for example, in the IBC or the incident finality side of things, there was those rates at the very high rate, but we knew this is one individual. And so the amount of hours were somewhat limited because it's only how many hours one person can do. In this case, the amount of hours is actually kind of high, which leads me to think it's more than one individual. So those individuals, in my opinion, would be known, like, these 3 people are worth that much.
Right. I'm going back and looking at the original documents. I'm pulling these up now.
Like, it wouldn't surprise me that in there, because it says Nation and DeFi box, it wouldn't surprise me that Denis in there. And I'd say, yes, that is worthwhile. I agree with that. Then if there was another person, I'd be like, I'm not sure that person is at that level, for example. In Instant Finality and IBC, we knew specifically it's that individual because of that individual has a PhD, that particular skill set, et cetera, et cetera. It was easy to say, that makes sense.
Sure. We did discuss, as I recall, we discussed these things, but I don't recall immediately at this moment what was discussed or what the response was. So I'm looking.
Do you have that other spreadsheet that you were showing earlier? I think that's the one that was showing the rates, or if you have the one that was showing the rates per different tasks, basically.
Yeah, let me.
And apologies, I guess this did require a longer discussion than 5 minutes. I thought it would be easier. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think the thing to look at would be, what's called the EOS Nation solution cost spreadsheet, and that would be on the tab page, the requirements tab page is how these were pulled out. That's where I did most of my assessment. So, and I think that got it down. So, for example, for the swap contract, that was 2 man weeks for design and development, and that was not all up front, right? There was some portion of that was in the beginning. Some portion of that was then going to be working with any issues found during testing and.
So you have them on screen now, Eve, if you wanted to take a look at the distinction.
Can you open subject, Jeff, contractors and rates, those 2 tabs? Maybe that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's the rates, I think.
Here's the rates.
These are the rates.
Yeah, but it doesn't tell me how
each.
many are at that rate. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, see, that doesn't tell me how many are at that rate. So all I did was the 190 plus 444. That gave that gave 634, but then minus the now reduced rates, which give 540 hours, 538.9, but 540 divided by 40 hours, that's almost 14 weeks for one person, which is roughly 4 months, a little over 4 months. And so that was just wondering how many are actual subject matter experts getting that rate. One person, two people, three people, four people.
Well, there's three contractors.
But not necessarily not every one of those teams have somebody that they will dedicate at that rate potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
No,
maybe UX doesn't have somebody working on this that is going to get the 320 hour,
right?
$320
like
an
in
hour
our
rate,
case, if you and that tells you that, because if you look at that screen here, it shows, for example, UX, we're only doing user documentation on a project, and we're only billing at the software engineer rate. So we don't have anyone on that ticket that is essentially like the subject matter expert. Subject matter expert are from the other teams. Nation definitely
so
has
Nation and
most.
DeFi Box. So DeFi Box is saying they have somebody
right
that will get $300 an hour. Do we know who that person is by chance?
I'm not 100% sure. It might be Eason. I'm not 100% sure though. So.
Okay. In 6 to 8 months. It's not necessarily that the price is outrageous. It's just still slightly higher than what I was expecting, more like $415,000, $420,000, which would have been about like what you said, Douglas, like a 20% reduction, but across the board, not just for two specific line items, basically. So it is still higher than what I expected would be kind of the final proposal. And not really basing that off of anything other than, like I said, the rates, but adjusted to the people that are actually doing that.
Yeah. Now, if you're on the requirements page, so I essentially went through these and I said, okay, as we look at the swap contract, the user documentation, which is, as I understand, going to be developer focused, but very easy with examples and whatnot. It doesn't surprise me that would take a 40-hour week for somebody to write those, get notes, go through the process. The developer, so that seems like a reasonable number. The 25 hours, basically half a week for somebody to do technical documentation. Again, bearing in mind that there's multiple phases and other groups to interact with. 25 hours doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
No.
So I went through. So as a big number, when you look at the user testing, like I think 50 hours makes sense. Unit testing, we all, that always takes longer than you think it's going to take. You have to figure out what you're going to write. You have to write them. You have to run them. So
do you know if any work that was done here is, like, for example, I look at flash loan template. Well, we know that flash loan contracts, I know personally that EOS Nation had a flash loan contract forever that's been audited, that's out there. Is there anything in there where we're essentially paying for work that's already been done?
We may very well be. So the one thing I didn't do was say, all right, well, I guess I did that to some degree, because the numbers for that are smaller, right? They're not, it's not like they're building this from scratch.
True. Lending contract is the biggest one.
Just quick note here, because I mean, I'm slightly familiar with the flash loan contracts that EOS Nation wrote, because originally I came up with the flash loan prototype that essentially I shared with Dennis.
Yes.
Yeah. But in that case, I believe I may be wrong, but I believe that he essentially integrated flash loans in other contracts, and you may not have a standalone flash loan template by itself, which is kind of, like it's a different task basically. Like you have it integrated like bits and pieces in something else, but now you need to kind of pull it out and build it as a standalone version. So yeah, you can reuse some of that code for sure, but it still needs to go through that repackaging and auditing and proper testing, and with everything that
you bring about an interesting point, Guillaume. Does this include audit, or is then the coalition going to need to go to an external auditor and get those contracts audited?
I'm not sure. Actually,
there was a line item for audit, one audit or two audit.
So if 485 actually includes auditing, I would say that's actually pretty good. If it doesn't include auditing, that means we need to budget an extra maybe 200K, rough estimate, maybe 150 to 250K for audit.
Yeah, so let me find that. That's on, again, this came in a bunch of documents. It was not ideal.
I don't believe it does not include auditing, because I'm looking at this total here, and keep in mind this total is just the group. There's also another document just like this for offline studios. So those two
offline studios, sorry. So offline studios is a different group.
That's
so it's really, honestly, it's a little different how they did it. If you look at here, offline is included in a bunch of these requirements. But notice BR 1, 2, and 3 are not listed here. Neither is BR 17 and 18. So there's another document with BR 1, 2, 3 and BR 17 and 18. So it adds another 130,000 to this, or this isn't the right cost. This is pre-edited. So that the 480 something that I summed up, that's the cost of both of them together, not including any auditing costs.
No, go to the first tab, solution costs. This is where it is, and it said the requirement costs originally added up to 383. So something around the 360 mark. And then estimates for external audits. One audit would be 77 K. Two audits would be 154K.
So here, I just copied this over from the other spreadsheet. Okay, so this is just like offline studios.
In offline studios, sorry, who is that? Is that
that's Francis. It's Pizza Finance rebranded, right. I think, or at least it's Francis.
Okay, got it. Okay, so it's not 383 plus 184. It's 383 plus 130, which gives them the 514, which they've now discounted to 485, which then we would need to add 154, give or take 150K for audits. Correct. So the total cost for us for the coalition would be around $650,000, because there's these contracts, as much as they're great, they're not worth much if we don't audit them, especially if then
they're not worth anything. I mean, the whole point is the audit, right?
Yeah, that's the whole point, right? So
yeah, so for me, you were asking if there was something that I thought was over, and that would be the stablecoin contract, because there is a precedent And
but there's a precedent for a lot of these, right?
What's that?
Like, for example, the flash loan or the swap contract, those contracts exist, if that's what you mean by precedent, on EOS currently.
Yeah.
Or on TELOS or... Yeah.
No, I mean that for all of these, there's a precedent or a model or whatever you want to call it in Solidity, right? But for the DAI-like coin, the NVM, that already exists in Antelope as well. So I actually thought that there was, I don't know. What I was assessing was the hours given for creating these. What I didn't assess, first of all, was the overall value, the overall cost benefit relationship for those. But also I didn't assess like I was looking at these as projects that were done generally from scratch, right? Because that's how they were presented. But and so that's what I made my price estimates and whatnot based on, and they seem to fit into theirs. But if there is, and the only one that they mentioned that there was a existing EOSIO contract for, Antelope contract for, was the NVM. And so for that one, I actually did think it was high, but again, I couldn't see any individual point where that didn't make sense if we were starting from scratch. But if these are already out there, then why were they included in the bid, right? Or in the project, right?
I just in the interest of time, because we're well over the hour. At this time, from my position, and thank you very much, Douglas, for actually doing all of this work. Looking at the one audit, 600K, give or take, 2 audits, 700K. From EOS, I don't think I can vote for yes at this time on this. It needs me to think more and or to go back a little bit, or the ROI for now, I think is not there for me from my point of view. And it's not to say that it's not worth that much. I'm looking at what we paid for and the process we went through with the SDKs, what we did with Instant Finale and the IPC, how we looked at peer-to-peer and such. To me, that's a little still overpriced for, because too rich for my blood, so to speak. Yeah,
and I don't have Telos's vote, but but my opinion is, even though for a bid, as a bid on an RFP, these elements made sense. I couldn't say no, you can't charge 40 hours for this at that rate. But when viewed in total, I was trying to say before, I don't believe that this is a good way for us to spend $650,000 or something like that. I don't think we get similar ROI for that as we do for IPC or some of the other things some of the other initiatives that we're putting money into.
In terms of next steps, then, Jeff, would we go back to the team and ask them to maybe go back to the drawing table a little bit? Do we just how do we proceed?
Well, there's a couple ways you can do this, because if there's a number in all of your mind that you feel would be of value, let's say, well, in fact, I don't even want to make up numbers. Just if there was one in your mind.
Well, I do. For example, that 485, the 485 that they presented, if that included audits, I would say that makes sense to me. I can see where we would get value out of that. But then the basically 45 without audits, and maybe we don't need 2 audits, maybe we only need 1. And then we as the coalition need to onboard the second audit later in the future, but that cost is in 6 to 8 months type of thing. Around the 500 mark, including at a minimum 1 audit, to me makes more sense. It is possible that for them, that makes no sense.
Right. And that's what I would say is, if that's a counter you would like to make, we can go back and say, if you include 1 audit on, both parts, because remember, offline had a separate audit with
Yeah, for
all
the
of the
whole thing
audits
total.
Yeah, one pass.
Yeah. The idea is we're not negotiating with 2 parties, so it'd be for the whole thing total.
Right.
But that's only speaking from me, right? So I could say, great, you're going to get EOS's vote, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get TELOS's or WAX's or UX's vote.
And that's where I was going to go next is, what does everybody else think? Like, do you want to negotiate that? Is that still too high? And, because honestly, if you guys feel like we're close enough where we can continue to negotiate things like that, then that's what we do. If you think this is just out of the ballpark, then just like P2P, we would vote no and, say this just came in a higher cost than we thought is valuable at this time, so we're not going to do it.
I mean, that's what I think. I think that it's a separate question. I did try to, and some other people looked at it at the time, and didn't come out and say, well, these are ridiculous numbers. I did try to make the numbers be reasonable for what the demands of the RFP were. But as a separate question, and maybe I got that wrong. It's quite possible. But at any rate, it's a separate question of whether going through this process in this way, what it's going to cost. All right, that makes sense. Now it's a separate question. Does paying that bring a suitable amount of return to the coalition chains? I don't think it does. But that's not what I just want to be clear. That's not what I felt I was tasked with solving.
So similarly to what I just said, Jesse's gone, but similarly to what I just said, is it out of the ballpark completely? Or is it something like I just said? For me, I'd be comfortable around 500, so 485, but including an audit, that would get my support. Do you have something like that in mind, or it's too far away that you can't even make some kind of proposal like that where you would feel comfortable knowing that you're not the one voting, but that TELOS has a mechanism internally to that? More like that, or not at all like that?
That is something I thought I was thinking, I kept thinking of at various points. I am so 170 whatever from the blue paper seems quite low. 300.
The scope was slightly smaller. I did review and there weren't as many. So here there's 5, and the rates were much lower. Again, because they were a blend between Sentinel's rates and Slow Mist rates.
Yeah.
But they inevitably also did not bid on this, and they declined to even continue down the path. So take it for what that's worth.
So I feel this may have. So to be quite frank, this, in terms of where TELOS is coming from, these don't have a lot of value because, we would probably focus on the we're going to, for the foreseeable future, putting a lot of work into the EVM elements of it, and not necessarily the native contracts. We just have more people engaging with the chain in that way. I think that I see the value of these. I think it's given that these are doable There's some precedents. So I think that this process for this, while it's very professional, it's not the same, and it comes out with a good outcome. And I don't think this is necessarily the way that any of us would approach it. Right? This is one place where, with multiple parties and multiple line items and all of this stuff, it does. I think it just kind of bloats the cost. And I mean, this seems like something that, sure, 450,000, including audit, seems like the chains will get that much value out of it, I think. But that's not the approach that, that's not the method we set up. We set up a very professional method, but that means that, and hopefully that means we'll get very professional results. But I don't know, but it's not the you roll up your sleeves and get it done and approach that I think a lot of our chains were born on. So this may be sticker shock just because we're trying to bring in more professional approach as well. And when we do that, hopefully that means we get better results, but also it means that the costs blow. So there's a good chance for myself personally, and I don't know for who else, that I look at this and it seems high to me because I know what we've accomplished, how much more and more complex and challenging projects we've accomplished on, similar budgets. So that is part of the sticker shock to me. I would say 450,000 makes sense, is including audit makes sense. Even that seems kind of high to me, but the approach that I'm thinking of is you get a team of 2 or 3 people and they do pretty much everything, and just sort of heads down hacking at stuff, which is not the approach that I think that we design when we do an RFP system. So there's a disconnect there between process and expectation. Maybe this is what we should discuss next Monday instead of.
Yeah, we can. We put this as the top of the.
Yeah, shall we end here because we're well over the hour? Yeah. Shall we end here and then just maybe go back? Lucas is gone anyways. Guillaume has to excuse himself from this particular vote, so maybe giving it another week or so to reflect. I mean, the people are currently listening to this call as well. I don't know, Jeff, I'd be comfortable if you share basically our current thinking with them and see if they come back with a counter proposal to their current proposal or whatever. Guillaume, you're on that group as well, and see if anything changes. And if not, then we can table this for next Thursday. That would work for me. Well,
that seems fine. My assumption is that somebody's not going to put together a proposal like this if they could do it for vastly less, right? So I think it might just be the wrong way to do it. The other thing that people could look at from this is there could be a small team of developers out there who could look at this and go, oh my gosh, we could, they basically just said they'd give $400,000 for us to take these 5 contracts, 2 of which already existed.
Yeah, well, I don't want to diminish the skill set that's needed to do this. This is still very difficult, regardless if this has been done. It's no easy task. So that I did not mean to insinuate at all.
Yeah, well, I'd also add this, kind of the hack and slash is great for startups, but if we're trying to build a protocol that professional businesses are going to weigh on, that's the requirement. It's not really our process. our process is just trying to drive us to perhaps a more level of stability in our software development to build that trust.
Yeah, I mean, that was, as I said, that's exactly what I wrestled with, right? If you have a more professional process, you're going to get a more professional result, one would hope, or one would expect, but you're also going to get a bid like this, right? And so when I was saying there's a disconnect between the process and our expectations, personally, that could very well be because, my expectation, I don't think that what we do is hack and slash, but it's also not $320 an hour to developers, no matter how good they are, so.
Do you think it would be disrespectful to them to go back and say, listen, as a counter proposal, we haven't reached internal agreement at all, but would you even consider the 485, but with one audit included? And then if they say, no, this makes no sense from our business point of view, all right, it dies. And if they say yes, then basically we have a different discussion next week to talk about, but now with an updated proposal, knowing, and they would need to know that it doesn't mean we approve. It's just, this is another opportunity at trying at this, basically.
Yeah, so even as we discuss this, my mind is sort of resolving that, it's my expectations are probably, and price expectations are probably lower than they would be for this kind of process, because this is not that we don't use this sophisticated process at GoodBlock anyway. Because we keep most things in-house. And so I'm applying an in-house developer and, in-house or some contractors price to this. I think that asking them to negotiate, I feel like I didn't give anybody an easy pass on negotiation. When I first brought up the concerns that I had, there was a fair amount of pushback, and some of it didn't make sense to me because it was doing what I felt it was doing, which was putting padding on padding, where one level of padding was acceptable, but not two. But I addressed that, right, and so I feel like we negotiated that. I don't think that I do think that we developed the process and the RFP, and then we asked them to bid on it. And so this is a little bit like a government type bid, and it's kind of getting those prices, and you can't really pull out any one thing and go, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. But altogether, there's a bit of a sticker shock.
So,
but we did ask them for this process. We did put this through. I don't think there's anything specifically unreasonable. And even when we talk about it, right, even when you were saying, hey, we don't want the slash and hack, we want this process. That's what we asked for. That's what we asked people to bid on. So,
well, I think for an action, I think what Eve is trying to ask is, I can do the work to go talk to the group to see if they're even open to the 485, but include the audit in it. But I don't believe we want me to go through that work if you wouldn't be comfortable with that anyway. I mean, that's kind of...
Yeah, I would say it's not really a it's not like a renegotiation technically. It's just saying, hey, the price we negotiated, that doesn't look like it's going to pass, and it's just too big for what they think the value of that is, and the value they thought that came up was maybe this price. That is. We should inform them of that because they've done a lot of work on it, and we don't want it to just be, all for naught. But at the same time, we didn't, we never built this RFP or negotiating process around, can you do it for 485 sold? It's all very, it's a disconnect on the process, and it's fine if we want to go that way. And maybe that's just the most expeditious way to do it, but it's not the process that we set up. So I think we should adjourn. I think a lot of us have to go, and maybe we can discuss this further offline, what next steps to take.
Right. Okay. But remember, all of these vendors, they're going to listen to this. I mean, I know they've been listening every week, and I still think I don't know my marching orders here. So am I talking to them saying, are you comfortable with 485 with audit, or am I not going to bring that up with them?
Well, given that we know that they're watching this.
Yeah, they're listening. Like, if it's the 700 right now or 600 right now, my vote is no. And so I can't speak for other chains, but I can say that if they come back with a 485 with audit included, you would now get my yes. Whether or not you get other yeses, that is different, but you won't know until you actually propose that.
Okay.
So if you're listening, come back with 485 and see if you can gather 3 other chains or 2 other chains to vote on your side, basically.
I mean, this was not intended to be another round of negotiation, but when we look at the big number together, it just seems out of relation to what we're probably going to receive as a benefit. And so, if I would say, we know you guys are listening, but I'm glad you're listening. You've heard what our thoughts are about it, and I would say it looks like it's going to fail to pass at this point. If you want to give us new information or make some changes based on what you've heard, or the concerns you've heard, that is, you're welcome to do that. It's not, we never intended to have this be a negotiating tactic or anything. It's just how it came out. Right. So kind of balls in your court, guys, and we would love to hear from you. Otherwise, when we come back and vote on this in a week, I think it'd be very hard to pass without EOS agreeing to it. Because I think the others are going to, because TELOS as well. For me, I'm not the voter, but I think that Jesse would have the same issues with the overall cost versus value delivered to the coalition.
And what's different here, let's say, than P2P is, for me anyways, P2P was just way off. It wasn't even close. This, I don't think, is way off. It's just slightly off.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I think this makes sense given the process that we set up, and I see how we got there, and I don't think there's any huge missteps there. But it's a separate question of okay, given that this is how much is it going to cost, are we going to still do the project, right? Or are there things that you may come back and say, hey, maybe you could just do these 2 or these 3 or these 4, and we can, I don't want to, open up a big can of worms, but I certainly would be open to hearing what you guys have to say, having heard our concerns.
All right. So I now, it's pretty clear to me what I'm going to do. And yes, because we are significantly over, I think we'll skip the status updates, which is most of the rest of it. And then I will see many of you on Monday. Any objections?
No. Thanks, guys.
All good. Thanks.
Sorry,
guys.
this wasn't a slam dunk.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Cheers.